Good afternoon. This is Arman. Wednesday, June 10th, 2020. Welcome to the Polymath project. Over the next several weeks, we will have a series of speakers on topics related to health and science, PhDs, scientists, practicing medical doctors, both of Eastern and Western orientation. I'm really interested in an integrated modern science that takes into account and pays respect to the thousands and thousands of years of experience, of wisdom, of foundational human sciences that have come through mostly the East, but that are now passed into the global lineage and are there for health care workers and wellness practitioners to learn from and bring into a modern context using modern tools and technology to improve the way medicine and healthcare is done. Today's guest is someone who's, I would call, of integrated nature, has lived and studied both here in the West as well as the East. Mariko Hirakawa has studied deeply in the Ayurvedic medicine lineage and system in India directly for 7 years. She has a medical degree. She's a doctor recognized by Ayurvedic schools in India and practices internationally, both healthcare, holistic counseling, and life coaching as well. It's really a holistic teaching. So I'm very happy to welcome her to the show today to talk to us more about how Ayurvedic philosophy and medicine and wellness can be, of value to all of us, but especially those of us that are coming from a Western context in mind. Mariko, welcome to the Polymath project. Thank you so much for being with me today.
My total pleasure, Arman.
So where do we find you today? I see you have a beautiful background and setting there. What part of the world are you in?
I am in Jaipur, Rajasthan, affectionately known as the Pink City. This exactly, actually, terracotta. And I don't want to call it stranded, but I have been here for the past 90 days, and I came for a 2-week, what was supposed to be a 2-week trip, and ended up here for like over 3 months. So I don't like to say stranded because it feels like a powerless thing. I'm living here as if I chose it, and it's a beautiful land, and I feel there's a reason for it, and it's really giving me fresh perspective on like this crazy thing that's happening in the world, this monumental time we are all witnessing as a collective human family. So I really feel blessed to have a beautiful abode, and the Indian people have been wonderful, and so I'm really happy to be here.
That's great. Len, like you said, everything happens for a reason. I know that you, from our previous talks, had spent many years, in India, traveling there, not originally from there, but traveling there to study. And your background is obviously well documented as in Ayurvedic medicine. Can you tell me and tell the audience a little bit about your journey, your inspiration for, taking that path, and what specifically you did on that part of your journey?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like, where do I begin? Because actually, when I was 9 months old, 9 months old, my parents, this was in the 70s, they decided to break out of the salaryman. My father decided to break out of the salaryman box of way of living in Japan. And he just took all the savings he had. He left that corporate job and he went to India, which, at the time they had no Lonely Planets guidebook or anything. So I was a little bundle in his knapsack. My mother was crazy enough to jump in and say, yes, let's do this trip. And everybody was against it. The whole, the extended family was against it, but they were like, we're doing this. So that's one thing. And they were in India for a whole year. They were in Kathmandu, Rishikesh, the northern India, living in houseboats and cottages and all kinds of places, and Afghanistan as well for over like 1 year. So
Wow.
I think that somewhere there, the dust of India got lodged in my DNA because, fast forward many years later, I was a dancer. I was a professional ballet dancer, Western dance, and then somehow I hit a glass ceiling with that, and I was seeking a deeper purpose. And through that, just seeking single kind of mindfully, just because I really felt I needed to know what my purpose was to like live every day. I was, it just didn't seem like why am I existing? It was an existential crisis I had at like 19. So that led me to discover yoga through a yoga center, but then it was run by these disciples of a master. So I simultaneously discovered physical, what we call hatha yoga. And during the very first class, like I discovered, like, I think I received initiation right in that shavasana, the relaxation of that first session, because I saw like incredible, I experienced my body as light, like never experienced my body like that, even though I thought I knew my body pretty well as a dancer. And so that led me to like, whoa, this thing we call yoga is like way more than just physical stretching and breathing and stress release. There's something far deeper. And that was a spark. I just was following this thread, and I asked, who is this master? And I was kind of skeptical about guru, but at that point I was so on fire about discovering my purpose and really desperate to know like what direction. And so just like took a one-way bus to the Catskills and met my teacher who, kind of opened the gate for me. And that led me to embrace teaching yoga full time. But then I realized the way the West is, thinks about yoga is very strictly physical, and it's put in a like fitness category, fitness box. And I just felt this is so limiting, because what I experienced was like way more than just having, the yoga butt or the yoga body, or, I wanted, this deep, it was like the most transformational thing I ever experienced as a human being. And what we're calling yoga just didn't seem to serve it, So through my seeking, I guess about 4 years into teaching, I just started to get all these private clients who were terminally ill with cancer. And it was just like very heavy for me. And after like seeing clients, and then I'd, just after a few months, one would pass away, or just having like many clients, that I was so close to die on me. It just lit a fire inside of me. And I thought, this is not enough. I want to, embrace, I want to learn. There must be a healing modality that that works with yoga, that takes this deeper. And so that's when I started seeking, turning every stone that I could, reading all this alternative healing medicine. And I studied Chinese medicine for about 2 years, but I felt like it's translating from one language to another. And it was always, something was lost in the translation. So when I discovered Ayurveda, it was just like a revelation. I thought, my gosh, this is like the same, they speak the same language, it comes from the same culture, and it had the same perspective. And it just felt like, perfect syncing. And I decided to enroll myself in the only Ayurvedic college there was at the time in the East Coast, and did that for a year, but nowhere felt ready to start treating anybody at the end of that year. And so I asked one of the doctors who did a module of this course, and they said, well, the next step is for you to come to India. so I followed them along, and that was my first trip to India as an adult in 1999. And after 6 weeks with them, I was like, well, I still don't feel ready. They were like, well, the only next step is for you to enroll yourself in a full-fledged university that accredits doctors, Indian students into full Ayurvedic doctors, and that's 5.5 years. Are you ready to do that? And that's when I just went, knocking around all the universities in India, seeing if they would take a foreign student. And at the time, not many, most of them didn't have an English medium course. So I was almost giving up, really. But I discovered through the grapevine that this one school does accept foreign students, but then it was like so much money for the tuition that I didn't have. And I thought, well, there must be a scholarship for students who want to study these kinds of things. And so I went to Delhi, and oh my God, the Indian bureaucracy is too much. But I went from one office to the other. And again, I was almost giving up, but something in me, I said, just keep going. And finally, I was like, I met this girl who was studying Indian dance on full scholarship in an Indian university. And I thought, where did you get that scholarship? And so following her along, I managed to secure a full funding for my education for 5.5 years plus stipend. Of course, not a lot, but so that, I managed to study in India for, actually it ended up being 7 years as an official scholar in India, in the Indian university system. Before and after that, I studied yoga and allied sciences, because once you get into this world, you realize you pull on one thread and there's like so much, there's yoga, there's Sanskrit, there's, Vedic astrology, there is Vastu, the Indian science of geomancy. There's like a whole, macrocosm really of these disciplines. And so it's like one lifetime is never enough, but I consider myself really, really lucky to have had that, and such a luxury to study, just dedicate 7 years of my life to just studying, which was a dream come true.
That's fascinating. And so what is the degree actually a medical degree, considered like a doctor would be here, someone that went through Western medical school? Is it the same corresponding degree in India?
Yes, in India, you are considered a primary healthcare provider if you have B.A.M.S, that's Bachelor of Ayurvedic Medicine and Surgery. Believe it or not, there is also surgery in Ayurveda. And so that allows you to be called doctor and, dispense medicine, etc. So yeah, it is pretty rigorous because actually studying Ayurveda is like 4 times the amount of work, because you have to study Sanskrit, you have to study the classic texts in Sanskrit, and also study the Western anatomy, physiology, pathology, all those things. You have to study both, and so it was. I'd say 5.5 years is not even enough. Really, there's so much knowledge.
And then within your study, you also have like what we would equate to a residency here in the Western system of actually practicing and seeing patients in actual hospitals in India, and you perform that there as well.
So 1 academic year is 1.5 years. So you do 3 of those, and that's 4.5 years. And then it's 1 full year of internship. And you kind of rotate departments. There's obstetrics, and there's gynecology and pediatrics, and just like a real hospital in the West, there's all these departments. There's also Panchakarma department, which deals with deep cleansing, specific Ayurvedic protocols. So 1 year, as a full-time intern.
That's fantastic. So how, I want to talk about this East versus West kind of approach to health and medicine a little bit. So with that background and the intensity of the study and the recognition you have credentialing there, we all know that in the US, like any country or area, they have their own standards. So how does that translate? So you come to the US with that, and obviously that's not recognized, I don't think.
Exactly.
Is there a correspondent or a way for that to be recognized without having to start all over if you want to be considered a doctor here by like a Western standard?
Yeah, it's really, of course, the B.A.M.S is not a, recognized degree here. So really what I can do is consult and with, you know, the disclaimer that I can recommend supplements and I can't call them medicines or herbs, you know, but so it's very limited in the United States, but it's much, the legislature, there's a kind of a war going on in the Ayurveda world too. You know, the American trained or the Western trained Ayurvedic practitioners versus the Indian trained, you know, B.A.M.S doctors. And so I think, you know, they need to get clarity on that. And so in order for the legislature to go through, just like the Chinese acupuncturists, they've been accepted. So I feel Ayurveda should also be fully accepted as well. But you know, with the FDA regulations on herbs and all of that, there's some restrictions. Still, though, Ayurveda's forte is so much on lifestyle, so much on self-knowledge, so much on even just, you know, simple herbs can make a huge difference. So even with the limited repertoire of things we can do here, I've seen amazing things. So, but I hope that, yeah, in the future, Ayurveda becomes more and more accepted.
Yeah, we need to lobby for that too. I mean, we're talking about thousands of years of just wisdom across all levels of health. And so what I'd love to do for our, you know, talk today, it's fascinating and we can talk about so many things, but in the context of this COVID world we live in and, you know, the response people are having, which has been largely obviously fearful and trying to understand this new disease or dis-ease and how it's the virus is or can affect us and how do we protect ourselves. So in light of that and in light of your background, I guess walk us through, and I know you have some slides and we'll jump, you know, back and forth as we're speaking. Just walk us through, give us a bit of kind of like an Ayurveda 101 in the context of today's modern world and you know, with some tips and advice kind of sprinkled in, if you might. I think people could benefit from a bit of an alternative perspective to what they may be hearing from the CDC, at least in the US. And I know every country has its own governing body and government's trying to do the best they can to hopefully to actually support their people and offer them real health care. So in that context, bring us your Ayurvedic perspective, a bit of 101. And while you're talking, I'll bring up some of the wonderful information you have here as well on Ayurveda and Agni and all of that. So the floor is yours.
I mean, Ayurveda is vast, so it's quite a task to really distill it. But really what I would say is that, you know, this crisis that is happening is really, we can think of it as microcosm, macrocosm, imbalance happening, right? And so when we talk about imbalance, I mean, because both systems like Ayurveda and Chinese medicine, they really are, their forte is in capturing patterns of energy. And that is why it's not just like you dissect and go to the very part, you know, it's not just about looking at the part, but it's really looking at the whole picture. And so I think that, you know, Ayurveda comes from the Sanskrit word, the two words Ayuhu and Veda. And Ayuhu is a word that means life force, but specifically because Sanskrit is a word, you know, is a language that has, is rich in vocabulary describing the subtle realm. So they have many words for things like life force. And Ayu is a very specific term for life force in the embodied form of life in this, you know, incarnation, you know, and like we have the one other word called prana. I'm sure many yoga practitioners recognize that word. Prana is a word like, but prana can be outside of your body. Prana is, you know, can be disembodied outside everywhere. But Ayu is like, it's specific to this lifespan, right? And then Veda is this organized body of knowledge. So looking at this whole COVID, it's really a world that's, you know, so far out of balance, you know, that, and I think it comes from partly our failure to truly know ourselves, our failure to truly recognize who we truly are. And so there's all this worrying about, you know, even now, like all this racial stuff that has come up. I feel like all that is being come up to help us bring it to the surface so we can kind of see, okay, we've been through that and that's not really us. We're not a race, you know, we are not this limited identities and all these, but we are, you know, something much more universal. And it's really, so Ayurveda does have this much more metaphysical dimension as well, not just this, you know, medicine side of it.
Right,
But,
it's a holistic system, a holistic
right.
way of thinking, living.
And it's also universal, you know, it has a universal outlook, but it focuses very much on the individual. And that's the difference. The Western medicine focuses much more on the statistics. And I think that's where its strength and its weakness lies, because statistics allows you to say, okay, this can be, you know, this statement can be made because for enough people, this is true. But then no person is ever a statistic. So it has a very hard time saying, for you, you know, for you, Armand, you know, this is what's happening in your individual system, and this is your system's tendencies. It can't really tell you that. It can only tell you like your blood pressure falls within this range, so therefore we deem you healthy. But maybe for you, you know, in the upper range, it's not healthy, or, you know, so it can really only give you that kind of vague range of statistics. But in Ayurveda, it's much more qualitative. It's really qualitative versus quantitative is how we can understand, I think, East-West in a nutshell, really. Because the Vedas always put, you know, the emphasis on the human being is, first of all, an Atman, a soul. And a soul that has taken this specific birth, and there is specific qualities that we are born with. And at the time of conception, there's a very definite ratio of the 5 elements. That's ether, air, fire, water, earth. There's a specific configuration that is unique to you. And, you know, it's really Ayurveda's, that's why it's called a Veda, a codified body of knowledge, because it's about you discovering that and you learning how to use that knowledge to balance yourself so that you can thrive. Because homeostasis is, of course, you know, part of health. And it's a dynamic, fluid state of balance. And so, yeah, we brought up this slide. So, you know, Ayurveda says like the entire universe is born out of Prakriti and Purusha. It's not in this slide, but it's like the Tao. The Tao becomes yin and the yang, right? There's the polarity of the female energy and the male energy, and Purusha and Prakriti. And then they go, you know, when they get polarized, there's also a third element that is created, that is the universal, that is the, I guess it's the cosmic intellect, cosmic intelligence. And from that, you know, there's a step down process of from the infinite into this manifest form. And it happens always from the subtlest to the densest. So first we have space, then we have air. You know, once there is movement inside of space, it's called air or vayu, okay? Wind. And then when there's enough motion there, it creates combustion, friction, right? And heat. And that combustion is called fire element. And then after a while, out of that combustion, there's condensation that happens, then becomes water. And water, you know, its nature is to flow, but then after a while of flowing, it starts to congeal and it creates the earth element. So this sequence of Ayurveda's, you know, subtlest to the densest, this 5 element Pancha Mahabhuta is there, and Ayurveda further distills it into the triad, right? Triad, when you have 2 elements, it has more personality, it has more power, if you will, and we call them doshas or bioenergies. And dosha literally means that which goes out of whack. That which goes out of whack, because it's not easy to keep these subtle elements in balance, and the sages recognize that. So that which goes out of whack, dosha, because it has the ability to create disease. So space and air form vata, and they govern the nervous system. So vata is the most powerful because it's the subtlest of these. And then we have the pitta, which is fire plus water. It's an unusual combination, fire plus water, because fire can't exist in our biophysiology by itself. It has to be contained in a feasible liquid medium. So pitta manifests as enzymes, acids, and even hormones inside of the human body. And then kapha, which is actually its name means flourishing of water, kapha. And so water and earth come together to form the kapha, which is the structural element of our body, right? The skeleton, the muscles. So this is like the, really ABCs of Ayurveda. And we all have all three. We all have all five elements. But yeah, it's about dominance. It's about dominance. Some of us have more vata than the others. And most of us in this era are dual doshic. So most of us are either vata pitta or pitta vata or kapha pitta, right? And so permutation of these. And so because of all the intermarrying that happens, it's most of us are not just one dosha dominant, but dualistic. And a very, very rare lucky person is called tridoshic, who has perfect balance of all the three doshas, who rarely gets sick. But yeah, so
let me ask you a couple of questions, because that's you I'm trying to think about how this relates to people specifically, and of course it does, but in order to do that, you went to the biggest macro picture, which is great, because that is ultimately the framing. I just think people sometimes have a hard time. Again, I don't want to make it about East versus West, because I think everyone has their limits and their ways of seeing things. But yeah, sometimes in kind of a matter of a fact, material sense, someone might say, well, what does this have to do with me? But what I hear you saying, and let me interpret, and you correct me where I'm wrong, is, these are the elements that, basically everything, all matter and organisms in the universe are made of, ultimately these elements in some combination or another. And as far as humanity is concerned, in our human health, both physical, emotional, mental, we have these different elements just based on our backgrounds, our karma, our whatever variety of reasons we ended up in these bodies on this earth at this time. We have all of these elements in some percentages. Now, let me ask you a question in that regard. A, correct me if I'm right or wrong in that, and B, is it okay that we're, as you said, that we're a little more trending towards fire or one element or the other? Is that because we all have more or less of one or the other? Is part of the goal to like get into balance and be more balanced? Or is it okay that we have a certain element or another as a strength, and then we just learn to live through that channel?
Yeah, great question, Arman. So there's a concept called prakriti, and the word prakriti means nature. So in the individual context, so we are all born with unique prakriti, which is like this ratio of vata, pitta, kapha. And so some of us have this much vata and this much pitta and just a little bit of kapha, and some people have this. So what I want to say is that it's not about trying to get, if this was a graph, like we have vata here, pitta here, kapha here, it's not about getting it all even, unless you are a perfect tridoshic person. We're all born with our own unique set point for balance. So if your vata is here and pitta here is here, this is your unique set point for balance. This is your original prakriti. And what happens is there's another term called vikriti. Vikriti is your current imbalance. So what happens is through the experience of life, your original setting is like this, but then through living in New York City, running around, not eating the right foods or whatever, your vata might come all the way up here, right? And your pitta might get even more aggravated because it's stressful, and so the point of Ayurveda is to bring you back to your unique set point of balance. right?
Mm,
So even for a, so a Vata person, it will be prone to more Vata disorders, yes.
sure.
And a Pitta person will be more prone to Pitta person hyperacidity, skin flare-ups, anger and irritability. So that's the whole point of knowing your prakriti, what is the cards you're dealt with in
Sure.
terms of the 5 elements, so that okay, my Pitta is really aggravated right now. I better change my diet. I better take a deep breath. I better cool off. So
Got it.
it really gives us ability to not go off the extreme imbalance, so because it's much harder to bring that back in. So it's all about coming back to our unique prakriti. So if this is your original set point, then you want to come back here. But most of us are here and here, or so it's because of this process of life, we have come so far away from our original original nature in a way. So
Right.
this is our attempt to go back from Vikruti to Prakriti.
Now, can that change over time, over the course of our life? Can our doshas actually, the base nature of that change, or from your experience and knowledge, is this lifetime kind of set for us in that regard?
Well, it's a great question. I mean, Prakriti is for most people for a very long time. It is something that doesn't change. It is pretty much with you. It's like it's really your genetic code. It doesn't really change. Although, scientists are now finding that it is actually, the genes can be changed through repeated behavior, right? We're finding that there is plasticity in that arena too. So it's not like we have to, just we're stuck with it forever and we can never ever change it. But our original nature is pretty much a thread that runs through our entire life. Now, there is such a thing as, if you live a very long time in a certain climate with certain energies, that the Vikriti becomes so constant that it can start to encroach on your original nature. And so it can become so powerful that it can appear as if that's your original Prakriti. This is also possible, yeah, because I lived in India for almost 10 years, really. And originally I was Pitta Kapha. Pitta was always my first, and then Kapha was my original. But by living in India, which has a lot more heat and a lot more spicy foods and everything hot, 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 hot. And so when I got my pulse taken by a very well-known Vaidya, Ayurvedic doctor, he told me I was Pitta Vata, after some time of living in India. And then, but I told him, another great doctor told me that I was Pitta Kapha. What's up with that? I thought Prakriti doesn't change. And he felt it deeply, and he said, oh yes, your imbalances become so constant that it is like covering up your original nature. So that can definitely
Interesting.
happen. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Very interesting. So let's bring it to the concept of, I know you talk about Agni, we've had some discussions about it,
Mm-hmm.
and in the context of just some advice, how can people, because again, for the people in the West, this is a new language. So
Yeah.
that being one of the elements, Agni, fire, talk about the importance of that in our health, how we could maintain that, how we can just basically understand ourselves better is one of the keys to just personal wellness. So I'll give you the
Yeah.
floor to discuss that a bit.
Yeah, so I think Ayurveda, if you only hear Ayurveda and the word Agni, you really have one of the key principles of healing in Ayurveda. Because fire, if you look at the 5 elements, fire is the only element that can transmute a something that is dense into something that is subtle, something that is vibrating at a lower frequency to something that is subtler in frequency. So Agni has always been a very seminal theme and a symbol in both yoga and Ayurveda, because yoga is also about transmutation of energy through the chakras and and this ascension of consciousness from the base to the higher. But in Ayurvedic terms, we can look at its physiological functions, as well as its psychological functions, as well as its spiritual functions as well. It has on all three levels. Agni is so significant. And I wonder if we have that slide on the functions of Agni. I think we have it there. And because really in the original text, now this is a cartoon version, but it's actually taken from a classic text in Ayurveda. And this text says that these are the functions of Agni, right? One is to really, it gives you long lifespan if you have strong Agni. Because if your digestion is not strong, if your digestion is weak, you cannot fully digest the food you eat, and then there will be toxic residual material, and that will circulate throughout your body and lodge in the weakest points of your body. We all have weak points because of past karmas or because of present life diseases and injuries. We all have weak points in the body, and that undigested residual ama will lodge in that specific weak point and start to fester the disease there. So anything like atherosclerosis, arthritis, you name it, most of the diseases are because of this ama lodging in the weakest spot in your body. And so long life is one of the things that Agni endows, and it also gives you psychological qualities such as stability and patience, and as well as confidence and courage and fearlessness. If you think about those qualities, it's like you can feel that fire. We talk about the fire in your belly, right? It's about that motivation. And so that is also Agni, right? It is also joy and cheerfulness and contentment. It's also about your ability to take information and digest it and distill it into knowledge, right? Knowledge into wisdom. So these are all also digestion processes, right? And the end result of healthy Agni is you have a healthy glow, a healthy aura, right? And you have this wholesomeness. And on the most physiological dimension, Agni is dealing with digestion, absorption, and assimilation in the small intestine, the stomach and small intestine, all the digestive organs. But I wanted to bring up this slide because it's all about, how many levels this Agni operates on. And I think, everybody who has ever had stomach bug, you understand that when your digestion is weak, your mental faculty is also not very strong. So according to your prakriti, according to your specific constitutional type, there are 4 possible modes this Agni can be. And here we're talking mainly the physiological digestion Agni. But so the first, which is very common, is called Vishama Agni. Vishama is a word that means irregular, and this is very common in Vata individuals. Vata is very subtle, right? If you recall, it's made of space and air, and it's not very stable, right? Both things are invisible, and wind is very erratic in nature. And so Vata people often have irregular appetites. They're not hungry when it's time to eat, but then they're really hungry in between meals, and they like to snack, and they don't have a regular schedule, and they're kind of all over the place. And so they have irregular appetite. Sometimes they have no appetite, sometimes they have voracious appetite, and then they'll eat more than their digestive capacity, and then they get gassy and constipated. And so this is often very common with people who have Vishama Agni. Tikshna Agni is very common with people who are of a Pitta constitution, which is me, and I know this very well because it is too high of a fire. So I can basically eat anything, but then I tell my partner, you don't want to be around me when I'm really hungry, because then I start to, I will incinerate you, It's just like, you want to feed me first, and then let's have a deep discussion, So it's about Pitta people tend to have voracious appetite if their meals are delayed, or they can go into hypoglycemia. Other ways Tikshna Agni can manifest is like heartburn and acidity, right? So that's also not healthy, so it's important to temper that. And then the last is Mandagni. Manda means slow, and it's low flame, slow flame. And Kapha people, Kapha is the combination of earth and water. And what do you get when you combine earth and water? You get mud, right? You get this, really thick thing. And so sometimes, Kapha people have very sluggish, usually slower digestion. And they're the people who can do without breakfast. They're the people who do best, occasionally fasting. And they shouldn't eat too much because then they'll feel very heavy after meals. So Mandagni is also not so healthy because, as I said, when you have slow flame, and if you eat too much on that, then the food will not be completely digested, especially if you eat late at night. It will leave, you sleep on that full stomach, and then you will have this mass of undigested food. And if you leave that for a long time, it ferments and becomes this very toxic, sticky substance we call ama, and it circulates, right? And it clogs channels. And part of what coronavirus does is also it creates this thick mucus, inside of the lungs. It blocks the passages, and the patient cannot breathe. And sometimes eventually becomes so hardened that there's no elasticity in the lungs, and so oxygen intake becomes lower and lower and lower until that's what the people are dying of. So we want to keep that. The last is the Agni that we want, Sama Agni. Sama means evenness, and there's many words starting with Sama in yogic language, including samadhi, which means equal consciousness, but steady flame, perfect efficient digestion, nothing left over. You're neither high or low. It's like the yogi needs to learn exactly the right amount of food he can handle. And there's a teaching in yoga like you should value your hunger, because your hunger is your hunger is a sign of health. Your hunger will keep you seeking and keeping you active, right? Keeping you active, keeping your mind sharp. So this is one great teaching in Ayurveda too, right? Like, don't eat to the gills. Fill only 1/3 of your stomach with food, fill the other third with liquids, preferably sipping hot liquids, and leave a third for circulation of prana, so the churning can happen, right? Efficient digestion.
So don't go for the supersized meals, basically.
Right, exactly. The all-you-can-eat thing is really, I know.
That ruins. You just ruined my lunch plans. There's a big buffet right down the block. Well, no, that's wisdom. I think most people conceptually understand that wisdom. It's just how to integrate these practices into our lives, which is the challenge. I know you have some advice and some tips for people that either may be experiencing some imbalance or discomfort, or just tips to use Agni, different types of spices and herbs, and the recommendations. So maybe you can give a couple of those to us right now.
Sure. And because of I guess you guys have come out of lockdown, but sometimes, people might not have the fully stocked kitchen. So let me start with the most universal thing that everybody has, is just simply hot water, right? Everybody has access to hot water. You can heat water. And the first thing is drink hot water first thing in the morning, because hot water will clear the channels. And if you did eat late last night, if you had that extra slice of pizza late at night, then the hot water can help start to digest that, and it will clear the channels. It also clears the lymphatics. So if you drink ice cold water, what happens is, like, the body has to retain that cold water. So it creates fluid retention, first of all. It gives you kind of water weight, and it's also stagnating the lymphatic flow. So we want the lymphatic system nice and flowing. And also it raises the basal metabolic rate, which helps burn more calories and, keeping the extra weight off. And it also, certain enzymes are not active at low temperatures. So hot water helps to really activate all of your enzymes so you can have efficient digestion. And you can't actually gulp down like large amount of hot water, right? So you can't really dilute your stomach juices either. So if you sip hot water with your meals, it will also enhance digestion. And then the second is, using spices. For Vata people or Kapha people who are not hungry, who don't who know they should have proper appetite but don't, then chewing a slice of ginger with a pinch of rock salt is really a classic. You can put a little squeeze of lime juice as well and chew that, and it will kindle your Agni. And Ayurveda really teaches, you should have warm foods, cook it, cook your foods with spices, and it makes it lighter, especially if it's like a lot of dairy. During the coronavirus pandemic, I don't recommend too many things like cheeses and things that are clogging of your channels. Like eating yogurt late at night, for example, is very channel clogging. Having the whole pint of ice cream late at night is also channel clogging. But
And you're ruining all my plans for the day.
Sorry.
Cut out the buffet.
Sorry.
Cut out that late night ice cream.
During the daytime, right? During the daytime, it's summer season, so you can enjoy it. After lunch in moderation. And Ayurveda says, it's not about deprivation, but it's really things in moderation and really making a little compromise, right? So you can enjoy the food, especially if you're pitta like myself. You can eat a nice meal. It's okay to feel like satisfied with your meal and all of that, but it's just make sure that you're not inviting future things that can be avoided, right?
Sure.
Because like having a whole pint of ice cream at night feels great maybe at that time, but then you pay for it maybe the next day or maybe next few days. So that slide that you just took away has some of the spices. So if people are, if you're into cooking, I highly recommend you use, ginger, garlic. Garlic is great also. Coronavirus hates heat. So ginger, cumin, black pepper, garlic, cloves, these all raise your basal metabolic rate. It raises your temperature, body temperature as well. So these, especially ginger, garlic is wonderful, as well as cloves. Cloves are specific to the respiratory system. So these two herbs are really wonderful for preventing, and even if you're nursing, if you already got the virus, there is an Ayurvedic remedy in which we make a decoction out of garlic and cloves and turmeric. Even just putting all those things into and just boiling it for a while and just drinking that liquid is also, I'm not giving specific formula right now, but it's garlic, cloves, and turmeric. Those three things are really wonderful for both preventing coronavirus and healing coronavirus. So, and this should be
wonderful.
Pretty easily available. Yeah.
No, look, this is one of the things I love about the Eastern approach. Food is basically the medicine, and medicine is the food, and it's all about maintaining that balance. Whereas in the way we're trained to think here right now, everyone in the US and probably to a large degree worldwide is like, just can't wait till the vaccine comes out, or to be told what medicine they can take, and it feels relieved about hearing what pharmaceuticals are able to treat me, or what medicine can I take if I get sick. But people a little less commonly think about, they would look at what you're presenting here as like, oh, okay, that's preventative, but what happens if I get sick, or how do I really protect myself immunity wise? But these are the ways that nature has made available to us, and I'm a believer, as I know you are, that nature provides us with everything we need.
Yeah, even just having this decoction, just 1 cup in the morning, in the evening, can go a long way. And because really we're finding that so many, coronavirus is, really everywhere now. And the people who are having strong immunity is, I mean, maybe they're asymptomatic because they're so strong, and they're just producing the antibodies. So it is taking care of our immunity, and we can't neglect also the natural source of energy, which is breathing itself. And so doing breathing exercises, which doesn't cost anything, and of course in a place that is, I would do it in a secluded place with lots of fresh air around you, but doing the yogic breathing practices is so powerful. I mean, we cannot discount the drugless ways we can really make ourselves strengthen our immunity. I would say those drugless things are probably the most powerful in a way, because anything that we take from outside has a limited effect. But if we are generating from within, it's we have the most complete pharmacy inside this body, right? And so anything that opens the channels, I think doing the yoga practices, the walking, just the physical exercise, but the breathing practices of yoga is very, very powerful. I think people don't quite understand. When I was doing the internship, I would often have patients of asthma, and the doctor would take his prescription pad and actually prescribe breathing practices like it was medicine and hand it to him. He said, do this every day in the morning, and also take this tablet of herbs. But so it was beautiful to see that we call this acharya rasayana, the behavioral medicine. We can't really discount this. This is actually the most important thing with coronavirus right now, right? So
Sure.
keeping that distance and doing all those, being vigilant about all those things, and doing things like the breathing practice, particularly the Ujjayi pranayam, the Bhastrika pranayam, the Kapalabhati pranayam. These are all channel clearing practices.
Right.
So, I think people can Google them or YouTube them, and you learn those techniques, and, you don't need anything external then.
Sure.
But we think that breathing is something we do 24/7, so it's something that can be neglected, but actually it's the doorway to not just health, but so many worlds. As you know, the mystical world opens through the breath. So and I think when people start learning pranayama, people are so surprised at how little control they have over this respiratory apparatus that we've been born with, and it's really a conditioning.
Right. No, it's training. Like anything, it does require some focus and some consciousness, some attention on it. I would love to have you on another time to actually walk us through some of those, maybe some of these yoga disciplines that you've obviously dedicated your life and your practice to. Mariko, we only have a few minutes left, so I do want to shift gears to a challenge that you can offer to anyone who's listening, as far as how they can further educate themselves on themselves, right? Because this is about self-knowledge and using these ancient, practices and health and wellness, principles that you're presenting here. How can we start making it more practical and personal, as you said, personalized and customized to us? So please leave us off with, a brief challenge, and then I'll pull up your site and some of the quiz that I know is on your list. And then within that, just a context of how people can also reach you to kind of learn more about what it is you offer, hundreds of people.
So first thing is, you can take the dosha quiz to really get to a basic level of understanding of what is the most dominant dosha in, for you as an individual. What was, what's the genetic card you're dealt with as far as dosha is concerned? And there's a really easy quiz. You can go to this visionaryyoga.com/dosha quiz, and it will kind of calculate for you what that primary dosha is. And then doing just one thing. I believe in really keeping, when it comes to building habits, it's always good to just start with one thing. So whether, if you're diagnosed as a Vata person, embracing one practice or one principle. I would say for a Vata person, it's like just regulating your life, creating some regularity in your life, whether it's eating at the same time or going to sleep and waking up at the same time every day, creating that level of stability for yourself, or even doing, warm oil massage for yourself every day. So that's something for the Vata person. Pitta person could choose alkaline foods. That's a really great tip for Pitta people. So if you do the quiz and you end up, that the quiz tells you you're a Pitta person, and we're in a Pitta season now, the summer. So how can you, keep yourself cool and choose, more alkaline foods? That's more foods that have bitter taste in them. And it's the taste that's most lacking in the American diet is bitter and pungent. Right? We have a ton of salty, sweet, sour, but we're missing bitter and pungent tastes. And so for a Pitta person, we don't recommend pungent, but bitter. That means green, dark green leafy veggies, or aloe vera juice, or what else is good? Coconut water is not bitter, but it is very good for Pitta person. So, choosing one thing that you can do for yourself that will, bring that Pitta down is wonderful. And then the Kapha person, if the quiz tells you you're Kapha, then I think the best thing for Kapha person is to move. So, implementing a regular exercise ritual, or making sure that your food is cooked and light in nature, right? Avoiding those yogurts and the white stuff, the white sugar, the white flour, as much as is practically avoidable for you, so that you don't clog your channels. And maybe so you can choose just one thing, and for all the doshas you can do breathing practices, because it's balancing for all the 5 elements. So implementing one habit, choosing one habit and doing consistently over maybe the next, if you can do it for a week, you can do it for 21 days. They say 66 days is when it really becomes automated in your nervous system. But it's just keeping the bar low and just choosing one thing and being consistent with it. So that's the challenge. So you can go to the
Wonderful.
dosha quiz for that. Yeah. visionaryyoga.com/dosha quiz.
Thank you, Mariko. visionaryyoga.com/dosha quiz. Thank you for your service, your contribution, your words of wisdom, and keep doing what you do. The world needs more of it. So I look forward to speaking with you again, having you on multiple times so we can continue this project, this exploration, and the practical nature of it, how it can help us.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Arman. I mean, I think the Polymath idea is really exciting, and the kind of the modern Renaissance, man, and and I think we're living and woman, yes,
yeah.
at a time of great integration, and I think that including integration of East and West, right, including integration of the ancient and the cutting edge. I think that's really where we need to go, and taking the best of both, and refining it. And it's really, we need to bring all these the treasure troves of world's wisdom together so that we can become optimized human beings, right? I think that's why this crisis is happening.
Absolutely. I'm with you 100%. And it's a moment in history that, as you said, 2020, this disruptive time, and it's a great window. And I hope that we as humanity can take that leap forward, but instead of sitting back and hoping, people like yourself, myself, and as we know, many others are working towards bringing that understanding together. And so God bless you. Safe travels back whenever you're able to make it back.
Yes.
And we'll stay connected.
Thanks so much, Arman.
Okay.
Take care.
Take care. Bye now.